let's be real. Break it down, heal and rebuild. Submit to God's will till destiny's fulfilled. Be a rebel like Jesus was. Do it how Jesus does. Cast aside empty tradition and learn to lead with love.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, and happy Friday. I want to thank you for taking the time out to join me as we continue exploring our theme for 2025, Destiny Focused, Destiny Unveiled. And tonight we conclude our final look at the connected destiny of Jonathan and David. Thus far, we have covered all of the 7 key themes, and we will conclude tonight with part 2 of friendship. So we looked at God's providence, destiny helpers, connected destiny, love and support, purpose, prophecy, and friendship as our 7th key. So again, thank you for joining. Come on in. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, and put your thoughts in the comments as we continue to explore connected destiny in our 7th key on this evening, friendship. What does friendship mean to you as it relates to your destiny, your purpose, and the plan and the purpose that God has for you in your life? Again, thank you for joining, and put your comments and thoughts in the chat. Let us go to the throne of grace. Gracious and eternal God, we enter into your presence. We thank you for this time to connect together. We thank you as we join together in faith and unity. We thank you as we surrender every weight and every concern at the foot of the altar. God, we thank you for allowing us to make it through this time right now. God, we thank you for continuing to speak to us, oh God. God, we thank you for the plan and the purpose that you have for us. God, we thank you for creating us with intentionality. God, we thank you for your unfailing love and your guidance that you continue to lead and to guide us. God, we thank you for never giving up on us, oh God. God, we thank you that even now you are speaking to us so that we can align ourselves with you and your word so that we can be and become all who you are calling us to be in this season. So God, we thank you for our purpose, God. God, we thank you for our purpose in the marketplace, God. God, we thank you for our purpose in the community, oh God. God, we thank you for our purpose wherever you have placed us. And so, God, we continue to yield and humble ourselves with you, oh God. God, we ask that you continue to lead and to guide us, oh God, creating us a clean heart and a right spirit, oh God, so that we don't seek after our own will or our own way, but that we continue to seek after you. Continue to seek your face. Continue to draw nearer to you, oh God. Continue to be who you're calling us to be in this season. That we align ourselves with your will and your way, and that we walk and represent you in your truth, oh God. It is in your Son, Jesus the Christ's name that we pray, and we say amen. Glory to your name, God. How many are glad that we have another day to give God some praise and to reference and to thank God for all that God has done in our life? Amen. And so on last week, we looked at friendship, and we began looking at the friendship of David and Jonathan as we covered their connected destiny. And we looked at the significance of friendship. We explored the impact of the covenant friendship between Jonathan and David and how their bond exemplifies commitment, mutual respect, and their enduring and deep bond that they have for one another, which is more than a surface fly-by-night relationship and connection, because they had a covenant relationship. Amen. Which joined and connected them on their road to destiny. As we continue to explore destiny focus and destiny unveiled in the life of Jonathan and David. Their relationships invites us to consider our understanding of what it means to be in a relationship, and then what it means to be in a covenant relationship. What's the difference between the two? Put your thoughts in the chat. and know that friendship allow us to be connected, and that true friendship allows us to not only have a connected relationship with one another, but with Jonathan and David, they had a covenant relationship with one another, but they also had a covenant relationship with God. And so when we examine that from that lens, we are able to understand the profound meaning of a covenant relationship, a covenant friendship, right? And when we uncover the relationship with Jonathan and David, it helps us to unveil and position us to the implications of friendship, because sometimes we can lose the term friendship loosely, right? And I just want to encourage us on this evening for us to expand our mind and go a little deeper as we look at the term friendship, especially at what a covenant friendship is, relevant to what Jonathan and David teaches us. And so we learned that their connected destiny was both positive and negative, right? Positive because their relationship had positive implications, negative because it also had negative implications. The negative consequences that David felt when he had to run from Saul, but also what Jonathan had to endure because Saul was his father. Right. And so the negative consequence because of his relationship and connection and covenant with David meant that there had to be a disconnect, if you will, from his father and what his father wanted or expected from Jonathan. David was positioned to purpose and negatively influence Jonathan in his relationship with the king because Jonathan's heart was knitted to David, which meant that his focus was on David and David's destiny, getting David to be kept alive so that he could enter into his purpose. How many of us enter into relationships that God have aligned that maybe our parents may have disagreed with? Okay. And so it's very important for us to know that when we think in terms of friendship, we also have to think in terms of purpose. Who are you connected to, right? Who are you connected to? And how is that relationship beneficial to your overall emotional, spiritual, and physical growth, right? And so we learned on last week or 2 weeks ago the implications of the consequences and the agreement when Jonathan knitted his heart to David, right? And so we learned the both, again, the negative and positive implications or consequences of their relationship because King Saul wanted to kill David. And so we can see Jonathan's alliance to David. Jonathan's alliance to David, which I want to point out is important because we have to make sure when we are considering who we are in relationship with and what we are aligning to, we must make sure that it aligns with God. It aligns with God's purpose for our life. It aligns with the plan that God created us for, right? Which points us or positions us in the direction to understand the power and the impact that people can have in our life in terms of relationships and the types of relationships we choose to enter into. But more importantly, the type of agreements that we choose to enter into, right? So Jonathan did not agree with King Saul. Jonathan did not agree that David should die. Jonathan rather agreed with what God said about David, and that's who he aligned with. All right. So just let us be mindful in this season what we are aligning with and who are we aligning with and connected to make sure or ensure that we are always aligned with the will and the purpose and the mission of God. And so David caused the relationship with Jonathan's father to impact him, right? Saul wanted to kill David, and Saul also wanted to kill Jonathan because of their bond or their relationship, and because Jonathan did not align himself with his father, rather, he aligned himself with God, therefore, aligning himself with David. King Saul intended to harm his own son and was a direct result of Jonathan's unwavering love and support towards David. The example set by Jonathan and David demonstrates to us the remarkable and power that a genuine friendship has. A genuine friendship, not a surface relationship, but a genuine friendship, one that's developed in the heart. One that is developed in the heart. And we know this because Jonathan said that he was knitted to David, which means that they had the same purpose. They were on one accord, right? And that they both were aligned with God and what God was speaking, right? So their alignment and their connection with one another was possible because of their alignment and their connection to God, okay? Their connection to God. And so we were also able to see the benefits of friendship, but also why it's important to know how we are able to cultivate these types of personalities or characteristics within ourselves when we consider who are we aligning to and what type of relationships we are in and who are we calling friend. But not only that, what type of agreements are we entering into? And are those agreements aligned with the mission and the plan and the purpose that God has for us? Right? Are we aligning ourselves with people who are trustworthy and supportive? Okay. And so when we think in terms of the covenant friendship as the seventh key to the connected destiny of Jonathan and David, I want to point out that the story of Jonathan and David offers us a powerful lens to be able to understand the impact of friendship and what it means to enter into a covenant, what it means to align with the persons whom we are connected to and call them friend. Right. And so this type of relationship goes beyond a surface relationship. It represents a sacred promise. It represents a sacred relationship, right? Which teaches us that their relationship was deep, right? That it has some depth to it. How many of us have some depth to our relationships? And we are able to have this understanding or insight because according to 1 Samuel 18 and 1, Jonathan and David became one in spirit or knit together depending on the translation that you read. This phrase signifies a profound spiritual union where there was intentionality, that they were joined with love and a shared purpose. Their bond was not superficial, but their bond was related to a deep relationship, a relationship again rooted in commitment and love towards one another to position them both towards their destiny. So Jonathan's destiny was to be David's destiny helper, and David's destiny was to become king. All right. And so we can see the intentionality of God with their connection and the power of their connected destiny, the connected destiny of Jonathan and David. The Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, which refers to the very essence of a person. And so within this context, their friendship is teaching us that their connection involves the deeper parts of themselves. Right. And I know a lot of times we hear or we can use the word soul tie, right? But Jonathan and David had a soul tie together. And that's why they were able to be knitted to become one, right? They had a heart relationship. They had a covenant relationship. They were aligned with God. Therefore, God was able to shape and move within the both of them so that Jonathan can become who he was called and created to be, not the next king, because he could have been that because Saul was his father, right? But his purpose was to be a destiny helper to David, right? And David was in line to be the next king, right? And so their relationship was marked by a sincere affection, by heartfelt devotion, and a genuine love for one another, right? I believe that the relationship and the love that Jonathan and David can teach us is patience, right? Because their love was patient. David did not just After he was anointed by the prophet Samuel, he didn't become king right away. It took about 16 years for him to step into his destiny, right? But the love and the patience that Jonathan had allowed David to usher into, to go towards what God was trying to lead him, even in the midst of opposition, even in the midst of King Saul wanting to kill David, which teaches us, right, that there can be some obstacles or some hindrances in your way, but those should not stop you from getting to where God is trying to take you. The only thing that we need to do is to continue to be patient and to continue to be faithful and to continue to trust God the same way that Jonathan and David did. Going back to Nefesh, they were able to do that because the very essence of who they were connected to one another, that soul tie that we spoke about a little earlier. Their relationship again was marked by their genuine love for one another. And so 1 Samuel 18:1 in the NIV version reads like this. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. This verse for me captures the essence of the beginning of their covenant relationship and also signifies the depth of their capacity to be there for one another, to love one another, right? Because they were connected and they became one in the spirit. Other passages that can highlight their relationship and their connection, their deep connection, is 1 Samuel 18, when we look at verses 3 and 4. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow and his belt, symbolizing his deep connection and relationship and love and belief in who David was, right? And who David was. And so for me, that tells me that God had to have some conversation with Jonathan, even though that may not be in the text. There had to be some communication between God and Jonathan in order for Jonathan to lay down his position as king, which could have been his when Saul died, right? But rather than bucking God or bucking the system or bucking what God had in plan for David, Jonathan surrendered because he took off what he was wearing to give it to David, which also represents David's purpose and also represents Jonathan's purpose as David's destiny helper, right? Along with their covenant relationship, which again is not surface, right? And so how many of us know when we think in terms of relationship, when we call people friend, right? When we enter in agreements, we need to be mindful that when we are aligning with people, it aligns with the will and the purpose that God has, right? But moreover, what it means when we give voice to friend, what it means when we give voice to those whom we are connected to. So that when we use the term friend, right, it should have some type of meaning and not be used loosely or surface, right? Because along with that comes with sacrificing. Along with that comes with giving up something so that you can be a support to someone else. Meaning that our flesh and our desires and what we want sometimes have to be put to the back burner in order for us to be who God has called us to be in that relationship, in that connection, in that agreement with who God connects us with, right? And so Jonathan and David was connected. Their destiny was connected, not by them, but by God, right? So it's important for us to consider the impact of what it means for us to think about what does it mean when we call somebody a friend. Put your thoughts in the chat. What does it mean to you to call someone friend, to be in a friendship, right? Because when we enter into a friendship, we are entering into an agreement. right? Meaning that I agree with who that person is and they agree with who I am, right? Even though we may not know the intricacies of everything that's going on in that person's life. So that's why we need to be mindful of who we are entering into friendships with, because we are entering into an agreement. Okay. First Samuel 19 verses 1 through 7 reads, I'm going to look at just verses 1 and 2 for our time. When Saul spoke to his son Jonathan in front of the servants about killing David, right? So that's the backdrop. And so Jonathan told David, my father Saul is trying to kill you. Therefore, be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself, right? Saul, the king, was speaking in his own home, right? Jonathan heard what he said and went back and told David, which tells us again that when we enter into a covenant relationship or a friendship, our role is to protect, right? And so we can see this being played out in the covenant relationship between Jonathan and David, because his covenant did not end because of what his father thought, right? And I want to say that again. Jonathan's connection to David, because remember, it said that he connected, they became as one, right? That didn't end because King Saul wanted to kill David, which again points out that they had a deep relationship, a deep bond with one another. So it speaks to the bond, it speaks to the commitment, it speaks to the connection that they had, it speaks to the love, but it also speaks to their trust. Trust because there was strength on David's part to listen and to take heed to what Jonathan was speaking, right? We also see courage and trust and vulnerability on behalf of Jonathan because he went against what his father wanted, right? He warned David what his father was going to do to him, right? And so he confided in David. He heard what King Saul said, and then he shared that with David. So there had to be courage and trust and also vulnerability because he didn't know how David was going to react to what he shared, right? How many of us know that Jonathan did not even meet David until David killed Goliath? That's how David first ended up in the king's house, right? So Jonathan shared that with vulnerability. It took courage, but it also took trust, which again speaks to the volume and the depth of their relationship, right? Not just with one another, but also with God. We can see this concept of a covenant relationship and what it means to be a friend, not from an emotional perspective alone, but that there was a deep, a depthness to their relationship, to their bond, right? It was a deep bond, right? They had trust. They valued one another, right? And I want to say what came up for me when I was studying this was Proverbs 18 and 24, which reads, one has an unreliable friendship soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother, right? And we can see this between the connection and the relationship and the bond and the covenant between Jonathan and David, right? And we see this kind of friendship between Jonathan and David because Jonathan defends David before his father, right? And we can see this in First Samuel 20, verses 41 to 22. Right. And then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, since both of you have sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. He got up and left, and Jonathan went into the city, right? How many of us know that this verse teaches us the power of a deep connectionship, the power of a covenant relationship, the power when you're able to risk everything for your friend, right? Everything for your brother, everything for your sister whom you have connected to, right? And become one in agreement, aligning to what God has spoken over you, over your relationship, over your covenant relationship. And that's what this verse is speaking or trying to teach us on this evening as we look at the connected destiny of Jonathan and David, but of their covenant friendship as well. The kind of friendship that defends, the kind of friendship that's able to be vulnerable, the kind of friendship that's able to trust, the kind of friendship that's able to sacrifice, right? The kind of friendship that's able to be loyal, right? The kind of friendship that has a commitment, knowing that you can count on the other, right? The kind of friendship that protects. So for you, put your thoughts in the chat. What are you bound to, or who are you bound to in a friendship, in an agreement, in a covenant? Because to have a covenant is to enter into agreement, right? And so we can see this covenant relationship between Jonathan and David. But what type of agreements are you in when it comes to choosing your friends, right? And are they aligning with your purpose, or are they derailing your purpose? Put your thoughts in the chat. And does your friendship reflect God's love? The friendships that you are entering in, do they reflect the love of God? Right? Do they reflect the love of God? And are they transformative? Put your thoughts in the chat. Are your friendships that you are in agreement with, in, are they transformative? Do they reflect the love of God? And are they leading you towards purpose? Right? Or are they derailing your purpose, meaning that they are hindering you? They are a hindrance because they don't align with God. They don't align with the mission of God, and they are hindering you from remaining on the path that God has set before you, right? Because sometimes, how many of us know that depending on who we are connected with can derail our purpose? They can derail our purpose rather than leading us to purpose, rather than supporting our purpose, rather than praying with us, rather than standing with us. This type of commitment that we are able to see between Jonathan and David, just food for thought. And David and Jonathan's story challenges us to elevate our understanding of what it means to be a friend, what it means to be in a friendship, what it means to be aligned with someone else and enter into an agreement with them when we call them our friend, right? Put your thoughts in the chat. So, what do you learn, or what have you learned relevant to what it means to be a friend? How many of us know that friendship can be sacred? And so, do you have a sacred friendship? Are you in a sacred relationship with someone who you can call a friend because there's trust, because there's vulnerability, because there's commitment, right? Because there's safety, because there's security, right? These are some of the themes or characteristics of Jonathan and David's friendship that we can highlight. Are you there to walk one another into purpose? Are you supportive of one another? Right? Are you in a covenant relationship? Are you faithful in your friendship? Right? Are you committed in your friendship? Can you be trusted? Is your friendship enduring? Right? In a world where we have shallow connections, in a world where everything is shallow and fleeting, what type of relationships and agreements are you in? Jonathan and David show us a spiritual friendship, a friendship that is able to be possible because of their connection with God. The friends that you are calling friends, do they know God? Do they have a relationship with God? And can they see or witness God through you? And so when we think of covenant again, it expressed through a sacrifice, a sacrificial love, a love that's understanding, a love that's patient, a love that represents the fruit of the Spirit. But most of all, it is connected to God. Because when we think in terms of a friendship, it has to be sustained by love. It has to be sustained by understanding. It has to be sustained by patience, right? It has to be sustained by vulnerability, right? Because when you call someone friend, you want to be able to trust them. You should be able to be naked before them. And I want to suggest that Jonathan and David was naked before one another. They were vulnerable. They were able to be transparent, right? The fact that David ran, right? The fact that David ran after he defeated Goliath, a giant. He runs from the king so that the king does not kill him, right? Which to me says that he had to be vulnerable to Jonathan. He also had to have courage and trust Jonathan, right? And he also had to believe what Jonathan was telling him, right? How many of us are able to believe our friend? Believe what they say to us, believe what they share to us. How many of us have that type of relationship, that type of covenant, that type of agreement when we call people a friend? Can we take that check to the bank and cash it, so to speak? The lesson that Jonathan and David teaches us is that we can, right? They were able to demonstrate to us the power and the impact that a relationship can have, right? Because they were connected to one another as one, right? We can see love, we can see patience, we can see trust, we can see courage, right? We can see commitment. We can see that their love had some depth to it. It wasn't surface, it wasn't fleeting. Rather, they entered into a covenant relationship, right? That had depth to it, but it also had patience. It also had trust. It also had courage. It also had dependability, right? Because David was able to depend on Jonathan. He was able to depend on the words that Jonathan spoke. He was able to do that and trust and depend on Jonathan and what Jonathan spoke to him because Jonathan demonstrated his covenant, his agreement that he entered into with David with action. How many of us are in relationships or friendships that demonstrate what we have in action? Meaning that their trust is an action, their love is an action, their devotion is an action, right? Because it demonstrates something to us that we can believe what they say when they speak to us, that we can believe because we're able to witness firsthand their love. We're able to witness firsthand that we can trust them. We're able to believe that there is depth because there is patience, there is love, there is kindness, right? In that relationship, and that it's not surface, that it's able to endure. Jonathan was able to endure, right? As King David was walking into his position to become king, he stood by him for a long time. He didn't just give up on him. He didn't just say, well, I may have heard God wrong. I mean, it's taken a long time for him to walk into his destiny. He continued to be his friend and be supportive of him, right? How many of us can say that we have covenant relations with friends that have been there through thick and through thin? I'm grateful that I can say that, right? I'm grateful. Put your thoughts in the chat. What comes up for you when you think in terms of a covenant friendship and the type of relationships that you have been in or called someone friend, and how those relationships have impacted you to walk into your purpose? Put your thoughts in the chat. And just know that a friendship is something that's sacred because it's an agreement. A friendship is something that helps us to go or walk towards our purpose, right? A friendship is able to endure because we have a commonality, and that commonality is our relationship with God. And those are some of the attributes that we are able to see when we examine the relationship between Jonathan and David. We are able to see their relationship and the power that they have, right? In terms of their emotional connection, the spiritual connection, right? Which teaches us that they were connected, right? Mind, body, and spirit, that they were one, meaning that Jonathan was concerned about David and David was concerned about Jonathan. They weren't just focused on themselves and what they wanted, right? How many of us are in relationships, right? That we are not only focused on ourselves, but we are focused on those who we have entered into agreements with. Because to enter into a friendship is an agreement, right? And sometimes we may not look at it that way, but it is, right? How many of us are able to be in friendships or have these connections where we build up, where we provide encouragement and receive encouragement, right? Where we're able to support, where we're able to hold, where we're able to be vulnerable, where we're able to trust, and where we're able to stand in the gap for them when they need it, right? Where we're able to put ourselves aside in order to support someone that we call friend. And I pray that something that I have spoken has been planted as a seed on good ground. Throughout this lesson, as we have discovered or unveiled the 7 key themes when we looked at the story or the narrative and the connected destiny of Jonathan and David, when we examine God's providence in their relationship, when we examine Jonathan as David's destiny helper, when we examine the connected destiny between Jonathan and David, when we examine the love and support that was given freely, when we examine purpose, when we examine prophecy, and when we examine and concluded tonight friendship, the 7 keys that we can take away from the power of friendship, the power of connected destiny between Jonathan and David, which teaches us the power of impact when we consider what it means or what it means to have a connected destiny to someone, and what it means to sacrifice ourselves, what it means to surrender ourselves to our purpose so that we can journey along someone else so that they can get into position for their purpose. And as we conclude, again, I want to thank you for tuning into another Dr. Myrna Minute. I pray that you go back and you read First Samuel for yourself and even Second Samuel, just to be able to gain some greater insight as it relates to the story and the narrative of Jonathan and David, and the impact that David made after he became king, right? Even though it took about 16 years for him to walk into his role, God was preparing him, right, in order to get him to that place. And so, how many of us are being prepared by God on this evening? As always, I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson. And I pray and I thank you for tuning into another Dr. Myrna Minute. And I look forward to gathering with you in community again on Friday, November the 7th at 8 p.m. as we continue to explore destiny focused, destiny unveiled. If you have questions or would like to learn more about anything that I've covered, please don't hesitate to reach out at transform@drmyrna.com. Enjoy your weekend, be safe, and remember, surrender to God, hear God's voice, and embrace God's plan and purpose for your life so that you can pursue destiny. And most importantly, as we close out this series looking at the connected destiny of Jonathan and David, so we can be more mindful of the type of relationships, the type of agreements we enter into, to make sure that we are always aligning ourselves with God and becoming who God has called us to be and become. Again, enjoy your weekend, be safe, and God bless.